Hello everybody and welcome again to the basement of video gaming glory. Anyway, this is the third and final part of the console war series, and yes, it is sad we're ending this journey, but here's where things get interesting. So, throughout the 5th generation of consoles, Sony was kicking everybody's asses. They gave Nintendo a bloody nose with the fact they used CD-ROMs, and managed to snatch Squaresoft away from Nintendo's greasy, meatball, mafioso, Italian plumber grasp, and thus led to Final Fantasy. Sony handed Sega their ass to them on a silver platter. The silver platter bought for by the amount of money Sony was making. In fact, they could have went for gold with diamond studs, with platinum plating, but Sony had standards. Unlike most people who live in Abu Dhabi, who decide that having expensive things, regardless if it's tasteful or not, is a good idea. Anyway, Sony then kicked everybody's ass with the PS2. Of course, Xbox, gave Sony some bruises, and Nintendo was so traumatized, they decided to go for their blue ocean strategy of marketing, where they decided to make shit like Wii Music, and Wii Fit, and Wii Sports, and Wii Play. And we know we're burying this game into the ground. So anyway, by going into the 7th generation of consoles, things were about to change. Microsoft was sick and tired of their Xboxes not selling, so they did what they did. They rushed development of a new, powerful console that, so bloody powerful that, whatever. And so they rushed development of the system and released it in the year 2005. Thus starting the 7th generation of consoles. Sony, obviously drunk from their success, and by the way, this is the reason why the Axis powers lost, at least to the extent that Germany and Japan did, was because it's very easy to get drunk off of one success and to make a few gambles, and when you gamble, there's always the chance you would lose. And more often than not, you do actually lose. Sony decided to do the one thing that the Japanese Empire and the German Reich did, and what they did was took a victory-drunk gamble, and they decided to try to replicate the success of the PS2 by pushing the new Blu-ray format. They decided to use the Cell processor. Oh boy, the Cell processor. So powerful that they named it after a Dragon Ball Z villain. That's how powerful it is. If it takes a Super Saiyan to kick its ass, then you know it's going to be a powerful part of your console. Sony, to make their console so powerful, so meaty, that the price point, and oh boy, the price point, at minimum, $600. $650 if you decide to get the 80 gigabyte version. Oh boy. And Sony, when people ask them, why on earth are you making such an expensive system? This isn't the 3DO. You're Sony. You don't set your price to 3DO levels. Of course, they're going to do it with the PS5 anyway, but we're not at the point that this video is going to be released. It ain't out yet. So Sony was like, fuck you. Our fans are so loyal and devoted, they'll have to work several jobs to afford one. No, seriously, they said that. They said that most people who wanted a PS3 could easily work 2 jobs. Which is stupid, because you are not saving up to buy a car, you are working to save it for a video game console. And video game consoles shouldn't be the same price as an automobile. Anyway, Sony released the PS3 in 2006. And thus the Sony-Microsoft-Sony console war began. And it began among other things, hardship. In fact, the Xbox 360 was more easier to develop for because apparently the Cell processor Not only is it named after a Dragon Ball Z villain that had its ass kicked by a Super Saiyan, but you needed to be a Super Saiyan to make games for the PS3. No, really, you have to have the ultra instinct speed of typing like Goku in order to make software for the bloody thing. It's that overly complicated. And of course, you know, the Blu-ray disc, you know, sure, whatever. But it was hard to make games for the PS3. In fact, the PS3 barely had anything going for it at launch. Sure, you had, like, Sega Rally and Sonic 06, but who the hell needs Sonic 06 at launch? Why? So, you know, Sony was really shooting themselves in the foot, and if you remember our previous video, bing, 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 bing. Microsoft was having trouble of their own. They rushed the Xbox 360 so much that they managed to get their console to be the least reliable thing on earth. The red ring of death, everybody. The console had so much technology packed into such a small package that there was no way in hell that thing could ever cool down. If you played it for more than 5 minutes, the thing would overheat, melt some of the parts, and boom bada bing, you're calling Microsoft customer support. Yep, that's how it went down in Microsoft's world. Of course, they were trying to rush new hardware models so that way they could, you know, get the reliability going up. Because Microsoft decided that, you know, that the German tank philosophy of manufacturing would be good. Well, if it didn't work for Germany making Panthers and Tigers in 1944, it wouldn't work for Microsoft making Xboxes in 2006. Or 5. Or 7 for that matter. No way in hell would that work for Microsoft. Yet they did. And they tried to, you know, to do as much as possible. In fact, they had the most, put in place, the most expensive customer support thing on earth. It was almost like $2 billion for them to extend everybody's warranty on everybody's Xboxes. To give them a sort of like, if you got a problem, we can replace it, no matter the cost, no questions asked, sort of thing. And of course, I'm condensing a lot of these things. I'm condensing a lot. There's a lot more videos on YouTube that explain this sort of thing in depth. Like Scott the Woz, or, you know, Stop Skeletons from Fighting. They all do much better videos on the topic, but I like adding my own flair to it. I want to describe it in my usual high-energy, autistic-ass way, completely unscripted, live on YouTube. Except it's not live. It's not a live stream. Get a life. So the console war is weird in the sense that it was anybody's game. In like 2006 and 2007, it was anybody's game of who would win. But where was Nintendo? Well, remember the blue ocean strategy that Nintendo had? Much like an abuse victim, Nintendo decided to retreat to its inner sanctum and do whatever the hell they want. And that's how the Nintendo Wii happened. Nintendo wanted to do... They didn't want to play with the big boys anymore. No, they would bully them, they would punch them, they would kick them, they'd give them too many wedgies. And so Nintendo thought, well, if having a social life means being bullied, I guess I'll be a hikikomori and live in my mother's basement, making shit like Wii music. But Nintendo was making a killing. All they did for the Wii was duct tape 2 GameCubes together and add motion controls. Who knew the GameCube hardware architecture would last them an extra generation? But then, of course, Nintendo had to release the Wii U, which was based off the Wii's architecture, which is based off the GameCube's architecture. The GameCube literally spawned 2 other consoles for 2 whole generations. Anyway, going back to Sony and Microsoft, I made part 2 and part 1 minutes apart from one another, so this was filmed after 2 was filmed, so whatever. So, it was anybody's game in 2007. But then, Sony did something. They realized, oh shit, our console's too expensive. So they switched their head of marketing to this other guy who decided to slash the price of the PlayStation, release a cheaper model, the Slim, and to combat the Xbox 360 with exclusives. And by the way, Sony would not make a profit off of the PS3 until 2012. But, you know, heading into those years, towards the end of the decade, Xbox decided, well, we were successful, but let's try motion controls. The Kinect. That sounds fun. And so they focused, especially in the Xbox 360's later years, on the Kinect. Which isn't to say that it was the most greatest of things, but, you know, it was alright. But in the end, Sony managed to kick Xbox's ass. Like, oh boy, in the last few years of, like, the PS3's mainstream life, it managed to sell more systems than the Xbox 360. Which is strange considering that the Xbox 360 had a great start. It had great games. It was easy to develop for. Couldn't carry as much data as a Blu-ray disc, but it managed. And so, you know, the console war ended sort of weird. Of course, the PS3 would be the last system designed by Ken Kutaragi. And Ken Kutaragi, by the way, is an interesting man. He cares nothing for what developers want. Sure, it worked well for the PS1 because everybody wanted a system that ran 3D graphics on a CD. Everybody wanted that. But then he decided to up the ante with the Emotion Engine chip, which, you know, did 3D graphics even better on a DVD, no less. And he thought, oh, maybe if I made a stupidly powerful system, more stupidly powerful than the PS2 on a Blu-ray, it would all work out. It didn't. The man left, probably because, you know, with Japanese corporations, they love punishing their workers for making bad decisions. It's almost like Japanese corporations somehow are even less accountable than American corporations, because American corporations could at least, when they fuck up royally, they could at least lay off people, both in the higher-ups and the lower downs. Japanese corporations have special programs that actually, honest to God, punish their workers. In fact, one such incident happened at JR where they punished a worker, put him into a punishment program, and then he decided that he didn't want to be punished and caused a train wreck. This actually happened. But in the end, the console war ended in Sony's favor. Microsoft decided that they were drunk off their success and decided releasing a DVR, or rather a VCR. And by the way, I'm not talking your late model VCRs. I'm talking like an RCA Selectavision sized VCR, because that's how big the Xbox One is. They decided releasing a 1970s era VHS player that somehow loaded Blu-rays and also functioned as a DVR could be a good idea in the year 2014. Sony decided, well, let's make a thing that's easy to develop for, powerful, and is relatively cheap. And thus, the PS4 sold copies into oblivion, being the fastest selling console on Earth until the Switch took it away from them. I guess Sony does. Sony doesn't what Nintendo does. Anyway, this is the end of the video. Please like and subscribe, and goodbye.